Thank you very much, Lucy, and welcome to this series of presentations on invasive reptiles and amphibians in the Caribbean. So, as a little bit of context, reptiles and amphibians are becoming an increasing risk to biosecurity in the Caribbean. There are increasing numbers of populations of non-natives within the region, and these are beginning to spread. It's certainly something that's been highlighted by a number of the partners in the UK overseas territories that we work with to support and strengthen biosecurity, and a number of rapid responses have been implemented. But unfortunately, the threat does continue to increase. So today I'm very happy to be able to present Joe Wasilewski from Florida, who's a very experienced herpetologist with a varied career involving reptiles and amphibians, and Jane Hackerson from the Cayman Islands Government. And they will present firstly, on the increasing threat of invasive reptiles arriving and being transported around the Caribbean, and also some of the management actions against invasive iguanas, green iguanas, when they have established on an island system. So without further ado, we've got lots of interesting stuff to cover. I will hand over to Joe for his presentation on invasive reptiles.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, everyone. I'm going to show you some things you may or may not be aware of, but in this presentation, I just wanted to kind of point out the situation now as it stands in the Caribbean, and everything seems to originate in Florida, which we have a number of invasive species. So without further ado, I will begin this program and start with the first slide here. Can invasions be stopped? There's never been a population of invasive herpetofauna, which are reptiles and amphibians, ever to be removed from an area. We're doing working on a lot of different techniques. A lot of universities, NGOs, agencies, environmental companies, everybody's working on this, and meetings like this, stakeholder workshops and everything is what we plan on continuing, so we can all learn about this invasion curve. And usually, especially on islands, by the time the invasive species is noticed, usually it's too late to remove them. So if you look at the far left, that is when they need to be addressed. That's when the situation needs to be addressed. And once they hit that curve, there's no turning back, because a lot of times they don't have enemies or anything like that. And that being said, there are several species that would have arrived at all these different islands and other tropical areas by semi-natural means like rafting and whatnot. Cuban tree frogs and several species of house geckos, Hemidactylus, have found their ways all over the Caribbean, and sometimes in somebody's suitcase, sometimes on some debris or branches that fell in the ocean after a storm, and literally rafted over. Now, here is a perfect instance. Green iguanas colonized the island of Anguilla in 1995 after several storms, and they were actually observed by some local people. A group of coconut trees came from a storm, were downed, and who knows, they were weeks out in the Caribbean Sea and wound up on Anguilla, which happens to have Iguana delicatissima living on the island. And Iguana delicatissima can definitely hybridize, and it's a very sad situation. And in this slide, I just want to show on the left is the natural range of a green iguana, southern Mexico through Central and South America. The top right is, you see all the dots are where green iguanas are not only observed, but breeding populations. And bottom right is the population range map from Florida. Just a quick note before we change this slide is um, every day I'm hearing more and more about different areas with green iguanas coming in. So it's an ever expanding range. And I just want to show some islands and countries with native green iguanas. I mean, you all can, I don't know if you could take a picture of the slide or whatever, but we can just keep going on this. These are the countries with native iguanas here are countries and islands with invasive green iguana populations. And there's just about as many islands and countries with the invasive as their natural thing. And this is a paper that was published in 2011 with the multitude of authors that we have established 56, give or take, species of non-indigenous herpetofauna in the state of Florida. And kind of the bottom right here, will the Bahamas be next? And I'm going to kind of show you as that goes. Bahamas is right next to Florida, just to the east. There's daily flights, containers, there's communication and movement every day. Palm trees for their nurseries and their homes are purchased in South Florida, where rat snakes hide in the palm fronds, marine toads hide in the root balls, and several invasive lizard species will deposit eggs in these nursery pots. We're really high on biosecurity, and that should be included in any budget. So I said Florida has 56. Bahamas is right behind with 24 to 27 species. And as we're going, Florida, Bahamas, where will the Caribbean be in this? Here's a map of the islands and countries in the Caribbean. And many of these islands right now have invasive herpetofauna. What is the answer to all this in terms of when we catch these and remove these iguanas or toads or pythons or whatever? Euthanasia right now is the only answer, I guess you could say. We're always looking for ideas, and by the way, through my whole talk, I would hope everybody I would give you some fodder to think about things, and if anybody has any ideas, please let someone know, let James or Lucy know, so we could pass it on and we could move forward. But with euthanasia being the, I guess you could say, preferred method, the kit on the left is called a captive bolt, and it's a 9mm actual charge, like a bullet, but it's a blank, and it just pushes a rod in. And this device is used for humanely euthanizing livestock, food that we eat, and the thing on the right, the piece of equipment on the right is a spring-loaded captive bolt. So both of these are used. A lot of the islands you cannot bring in any firepower, so the one on the right is possibly the one you could use. I'm going to just talk about some of the different invasive herpetofauna that we find, not only in Florida, not only in Bahamas, but different islands of the Caribbean. We're going to start with invasive snakes. This is a Burmese python that was caught in Key Largo, Florida. Burmese pythons, I don't know if any of you in the audience are aware of, but they have made a home in Florida since about the mid-90s, early 2000s. And the map on the left is the natural range of a Burmese python. The map on the right is the range of pythons in Florida. Although, as I say that, and as climate change is warming things, they're going further north in Florida. A couple slides of just to let you know, the state of Florida hired 100 contractors that are paid an hourly wage to hunt pythons, and were pretty successful. And so far, we've removed over 17,000 Burmese pythons from the Everglades. I just want to show you this. This is a photo of a python, a Burmese python with a radio transmitter that we followed for about a year. We followed 3 males in the same canal, uh, 2 meters, 3 meters, and 4 meters. And the 2 and 3 meter snake, especially the 2 meter, were usually up in trees. As they grow, they become more terrestrial. We're trying to learn about their habits. And here's a couple. These are not the best photos in the world, but if you look closely on the left, you'll see that's a Burmese python constricting a green iguana. And the right is green iguana scat from a Burmese python. So invasive is now eating invasive in Florida. That's how many there are. This is another invasive snake that I don't want to say just popped up or just occurred. These are Brazilian rainbow boas, and it's funny because they're in a specific range in South Florida, and we know of at least 24 that have been captured, from adults to neonates. Aruba Island has an endemic species of rattlesnake, which is really in danger of extinction right now because of the invasive boas. The boas got to the island around 99, 2000, and they're directly competing with the rare endemic rattlesnake. We're putting together a program to go there and see if we could help remove some of these or all of these boas. Puerto Rico is kind of a hidden gem that nobody really talks about, but the 2 photos on the left are Colombian boa constrictors, and the 2 photos on the right are reticulated pythons. They're both commonly found in Puerto Rico. Thing about the reticulated pythons, which are known to grow over 9 meters in length, is their food supply in Puerto Rico is much, much, much more limited than the Everglades. They don't have large mammals in Puerto Rico. So what's happening is they're finding the reticulated pythons around agricultural areas, farms, raising chickens and goats, because that's what they're feeding on. I just wanted to put this little guy in there. This is about a 10 centimeter long, called the Brahminy blind snake, and it's they also call it the flower pot snake because it's usually found. It's a subterranean snake, small, inoffensive. We don't know what impact it's having on the environment. I just wanted to show that can be found in any tropical region. Let's talk some about lizards. The bottom left, excuse me, is a butterfly agamid. On the right is a Madagascan day gecko. Florida has, oh my God, so many different species of lizards. This, besides the green iguana and the Burmese python, I feel the black and white tegu is one of the most injurious animals. We've been trapping them. They're black and white tegus from Argentina. We've been trapping them for 15 years or so. We're trapping up to 1,000 every year. This year, we have, by the way, they're only found from March through October. They brumate from October through March. So we have the season with them. And let's see the next slide, and you'll see that we found an alligator nest out of season. And we said, when it's time of the year for alligators to nest, we're going to put motion cameras there. Well, we counted 33 alligator eggs, 2 nests of Sudanese turtles, and we found 3 different tegus that came into that nest, and over a 3 to 4 week period of time, ate every single egg in a nest. Florida also has a very rare and threatened species, the American crocodile. We're trying to keep them from we're trying to keep the tegus from the crocodile nests. And this map here shows the dots are different agencies for different trap lines. And if you'll notice on the far right, the blue trap lines, that is a nesting area for American crocodiles. And we have 80 traps there right now that we're checking every day to keep them from the crocodile eggs, because they lay eggs in April. Spiny-tailed iguana, or Mexican black iguana, is also found in spotty areas of Florida, but where it's found on the west coast of Florida, it's very common, and it causes a lot of problems digging out seawalls. And there are a lot of burrowing owls in the area, which are protected species, and they actually go right into the burrows and eat either the eggs or the young birds. Thing about them is they're kind of localized, and range hasn't really increased like green iguanas. I mentioned Madagascan day geckos. Uh, they're found mostly in the Florida Keys, and now they're expanding. People just catch them, and we call it, they seed other areas. We don't know the impact of this, nor do we know the impact of other lizards in Florida, like the tokay gecko. Tokay geckos are used to be sold in the 1980s and 90s in pet shops, and they were advertised, let them go in your house. They'll clear your problem of roaches. And I don't know if you folks know anything about Florida, but we call them palmetto bugs, and they're in everybody's house. And so everybody used to get tokays. Well, now they're all over South Florida. Another reptile that we don't know the impact are chameleons. And some amazing, the one on the left is from Yemen, and the one on the right is from Madagascar. Well, and the one in the middle as well. There are 5 different species of chameleons commonly found in Florida. Basilisk lizards. The one on bottom left is the male, and the female is not quite adorned with all of the sail fins, but they're commonly found in Florida. The basilisk and this Peter's rockagama are ones we really are concerned about, because these are the lizards that will lay the eggs in the nursery pots and be taken all over the Caribbean. And the map on the left is kind of an old map, because this what I'm talking about, folks, is happening every day. These animals are being transported every day. Ranges are increasing every day, and we need to get a handle on it. And by the way, this is a photo of the male. And the previous, I should have mentioned the one in the male are brightly colored, and the females are dull brown gray. We were tasked, or James Millett was, in October of 23. There was a Peter's rockagama that was found in the port in Tortola, and it took us quite a few days, but it was removed. And not long after that, well, January of 24, our other invasive species hero, Jane, and her crew removed Peter's rock iguana from Grand Cayman. So I don't like it, but I fully expect this species of lizard to inhabit a lot of different islands to come. I just want to say a couple words about crocodilians and turtles, because South Florida had a rash of Nile crocodiles, believe it or not. We caught 4 Nile crocodiles in South Florida in a 2-year period, leading some of us to be afraid of a population of Nile crocs. They're the ones that you see on National Geographic pulling zebras into the water. And we certainly don't want this hybridization in Florida. We think we have that one under control. Spectacled caiman are found in South Florida. I've been catching them, I'm going to have to say, over 30 years, close to 40. And they haven't really expanded their range. But they are found commonly in Puerto Rico and the Isle of Youth, which is south of Cuba. I also caught 2 alligators in the Bahamas, believe it or not, in the 2000s. Someone must have brought babies. They released them in a pond in a golf course. The golf course went under. The ponds grew up with cattails and Brazilian pepper. Nobody knew it. And by the time we caught them, they were 2 meters in length. Red-eared slider is the one on the bottom in the photo, and the native Bahamian slider is on the top. The map left, top left is the natural range of the red-eared slider, and the bottom map is similar to the one I showed you with the iguanas, where all the dots are areas. And the thing about red-eared sliders, I think they're the most, how could I say, most invasive herpetofauna species because they're temperate. They could live in Germany and Russia and Poland, and they do, and there's populations all over Europe. Let's talk a little bit of amphibians. The one on the bottom left is an Eleutherodactylus, a frog about this big. They call them coqui. And the one on the right is a Cuban tree frog. This is just a photo of a colleague of mine in California, scooped up. The water was getting low in this one pond. This is one scoop of a net of tiger salamanders, which are native in the United States east of the Mississippi. But because of several factors, one factor is bait and tackle shops get with minnows, the larvae, the tadpoles of the salamanders are in with the fish. And when a fisherman finishes for the day, he dumps it in the water, and this happened. Another quick little anecdotal note is in Florida, we have a salamander that comes from the Pacific Northwest. And how it got there was through a shipment of Christmas trees, believe it or not. So anything can be suspect in bringing these animals from island to island. Another very, how could I say, very widespread species of amphibian. On the top left, you'll see the map of the red color is its normal range, and the dark green is where now it's found commonly. The thing about the bullfrog is they are captured and they're eaten and they're sold in the United States. So if we could get them on the menu, maybe we can knock them numbers down a little bit. I already mentioned the Cuban tree frog as being very prolific and being able to be transported from island to island by natural rafting. But because of humans, they're moving around a lot quicker. And the problem is I should say, there is a problem in Jamaica. Jamaica has 4 species, endemic species of Osteolaemus, which is the genus of the Cuban tree frog. And now that the Cuban tree frog, it's Osteolaemus septentrionalis, is in Jamaica, the fear is, and it's a really definite fear, that they could hybridize with these, making the endemic species non-existent. And one of them, or several of them, by the way, I should say, are considered endangered by the IUCN Red List. And here is the grandfather of all invasive species, cane toads or marine toads, Rhinella marinus. And they have been placed in every single island or country that raises sugarcane back in the 17 and 1800s, and they have just taken over. And the thing about the cane toads is their parotoid glands contain a poison. And in Florida, 1 or 2 dogs every year perish by chewing on one of these cane toads. And in Australia, almost a whole species of goanna or monitor lizard and freshwater crocodile were almost wiped out by eating these. Believe it or not, the crocodiles and the goannas have learned to avoid these cane toads. I just wanted to, I could keep going on and on with different slides of different countries with invasive reptiles, and I just chose South Africa, and you could just look for yourself the different species. We don't know right now if these are breeding populations, but what has been confirmed that these animals that you see in this list have been caught in the wild in South Africa. Why is this important? I don't want to step into Jane's talk, but on Little Cayman in 2016, the photo on the left, the top lizard is a hatchling green iguana, and the photo on the right, the top lizard, is a hatchling sister island iguana, Cyclura nubila caymanensis. The one on the bottom is a mixture between the two. We as scientists or just lay people never in a million years thought that iguana genus could hybridize with Cyclura. So this poses a whole brand new threat to invasive species. And I just received a photo. I don't think it's so new that I couldn't put it in the talk, of a lizard from Otilla that looks like it could be a hybrid. So what's the solution? Legislation, permitting, limiting ownership. We need more programs for removal, and we need to keep pressure. I mentioned earlier, the most important thing is organizing biosecurity in the country of origin. 2 days ago, a shipment, a container came from Miami to Kingston, the port in Kingston, Jamaica, and one of our colleagues removed 6 adult iguanas from this container, one of them containing eggs. So this is how they get around, and this is what we're trying to stop. And I guess on my final slide, I kind of like this picture, some of you may have seen, I don't know, this is 30,000, 40,000 bison or buffalo skulls. And, you know, back before 1800, there was over 60 million buffalo in the United States. In 100 years, they were down to 300. They literally could have exterminated them, but because of conservation measures, they're back. Could we do the same thing with the reptiles is my question. You know, there's so many people for me to thank to show me the way and show me how to do these things, that this is just a few of the acknowledgements. Thank you. And thank you all. And I guess, as James mentioned earlier, or Lucy, I don't know how we'll do the questions, but if anybody has questions, I'll be here to answer, or try to answer. So thank you all I hope you paid attention.
Thank you, Joe. That was brilliant. As ever, a very informative and edifying presentation, if not slightly concerning, I have to say. Just whilst Jane loads up her presentation, I will just pick up on a couple of your points. If we can have the questions at the end, that would be great, and do feel free to put comments and questions in the chat. Joe's very much hit on a couple of very important issues about biosecurity. Biosecurity at the point of origin is obviously a very effective way to reduce the risk, but also the potential for rapid response and having contingency plans to deal with reptiles and amphibians, as well as other biosecurity risks on arrival. But Jane is now going to present on what happens when the genie has gotten out of the bottle, to all intents and purpose. The green iguanas have become very well established in many of the Caribbean islands, including the Cayman Islands, and the Caymans have had quite an impressive long-term program of management. So I will now hand over to Jane, who will present on that subject.
Thank you so much, James. Can you see the screen now and the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
looks perfect.
Perfect, thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me, James and Lucy. And following on from Joe's talk, I think it's a pretty dire situation, given that I'm just talking about one of those species. And unfortunately, a lot of what Joe talked about is now cropping up as well, on top of this particular issue that we've been dealing with for a number of years. So I'm Jane Hokanson, and I work for the Department of Environment in the Cayman Islands. And I always like to start with this picture because I always thought my career was actually off to a pretty good start. You know, I worked in the UK in zoos. I managed to infiltrate the government of the Cayman Islands and the iguana specialist group. And I was just loving reptiles, only for me to end up, you know, killing thousands of them with my own bare hands. So a lot of my work now consists of invasive species management, and it's really grim. And I think that picture talks to that point. We're not here to kill and destroy animals, rather to then saving them. So I don't know exactly what happened in my career in order for me to end up here, but this is really what we're dealing with in the islands. So my presentation, and do let me know if I'm going over time slightly, because there's a lot to say. But I've divided it into 4 sections. So just talking about the green iguana abundance in the Cayman Islands, and primarily Grand Cayman. We have three islands. And then the management actions, some of our trials and tribulations in the beginning, and then the observed population changes, which I think is really important from a management perspective, but also a biological perspective. And of course, some future recommendations, not just for ourselves, and again, if there's someone in the audience that have ideas when I present the problems we're dealing with now, do feel free to reach out to me individually or to James and Lucy. We appreciate everyone's thoughts in this. It's a complex issue. So a quick note to talk about the iguanas that we do have that we're trying to save. As Joe mentioned, we have the genus Cyclura, rock iguanas, and they're widespread throughout the West Indies, as you can see. So we're number 3 and 2 on the map over in the left corner. We've got the blue iguana in Grand Cayman and the Sister Island rock iguana in the Sister Islands, the Cayman bracken Little Cayman, where unfortunately we have discovered hybridization events. So it's very likely to happen on Grand Cayman as well, given our iguanas are so closely related to our native and endemic ones. So it is believed, anecdotally, that the first iguanas were brought to Grand Cayman in the 70s, both through the exotic pet trade, but more primarily through food resources being distributed by boat from Central and South America. A lot of them being let go, escaping storms, rendering pens unstable. And before 2004, which is when we had that horrible Hurricane Ivan that really destroyed the islands, we didn't actually see a lot of them. So this is what is interesting to me, is that from 70s to 2004, it seemed like there was almost some kind of, natural lid on the population. But after 2004, they just basically exploded. And I'll talk to you about some of the population numbers. When we first monitored it in 2014, which is when everyone started to realize there was an overabundance, we measured or recorded an estimated 250,000 green iguanas, which everyone would be, questioning the number of that given our very small island. But unfortunately, we're right on the money, as we later found out when the iguanas were brought to us as part of the control effort. So a quick note to those of you who are new to iguanas and their invasive potential and their destructive habits. It's not just a Department of Environment issue. It is an issue for anyone who wants to keep a garden or a pool. They go in the water, they defecate, of course, causing, a lot of health hazards as well. Anything you try and grow, especially ornamentals, they're just decimating it. The trees and your flowers, bushes and shrubs cannot sustain the depredation. Farmers have had to protect their crops individually, putting up very expensive meshes and fences. They unfortunately burrow as well as climb, and they actually undermine a lot of our infrastructure, so they can cause damages and collapses of roads, of course, but houses as well. And our CUC company, that's our local electricity company, has had to put, if you can see, those metal sheetings up on all of the utility poles, simply because the arboreal nature of these animals shorted out a lot of our electricity and caused power outages on a regular basis. So when you think about just what I've just said, it's really as an island-wide issue. It's not just if you care about the environment, which hopefully you all do. Public health issues. We've had just an extreme amount of iguanas, on the docks. They like to flee into the water if you're trying to catch them. And of course, as Joe said, without any natural predation going on, you have animals that live to an adult mature age and then they die, right? Nothing lives forever. And the rotting carcasses have caused multiple pet deaths, as well as, concerns for toxins in the environment with pathogenic bacteria. And I really like Ray Millett's picture here because nothing I can really say can sort of, instill how big the issue is. As you can see here, this tree is harboring at least 50 or so iguanas, a lot smaller ones as well, and the trees just cannot keep up with with this level of defoliation. Mangroves are important to all island systems, and of course we're seeing a big issue in our mangroves as well, especially at the height of the density. And then finally, we found a direct connection to diseases in our blue iguanas, unfortunately. That a lot of them started exhibiting very specific behaviors with paralysis of the back legs, and within 24 hours, they passed away. And as you can see in this email here, when we finally got, an understanding that the green iguanas were indeed positive by this pathogenic Helicobacter, we could start managing, that we lost so many animals, a lot of ambassadors, really, beautiful old breeders to this disease. And so, it raises other conservation impact management, applications. And as Joe mentioned, we have had hybridization on little Cayman, and unfortunately, multiple times, I should say, not just a one-off. And we are worried that this is something that we might see on Grand Cayman in due course as well. So a quick note on our sampling efforts and our monitoring efforts. This is Grand Cayman, which I'm primarily speaking about today. We have a point count survey, so we do distance sampling. Very simple methodology. Anyone can kind of do it. And then you just need to know when you truncate your data. So, how far you're going to look from each of these points and count the iguanas, just using distance sampling or distance binoculars. And this is the results that we've had. And it kind of speaks for itself. Hey, Joe, could you mute your mic? Because I think you're like coughing into the presentation.
Sorry.
That's okay. So anyway, so these are the island-wide results. The green iguana abundance in August 2014 was, as I said, around 250,000 iguanas. And then in August 2015, we saw 400,000, just about. Of course, we have CVs and standard deviations around those numbers, in case you're interested. In August of 16, we had a population of around 800,000. And then in 17, we reached 1 million. In 2018, this is all before control efforts really took on, we reached 1,300,000 iguanas. And this is in, as I said, 19,700 hectares. As you can see, that's a very, very high density. But the biologists in the room will likely have noticed exactly what's the most scary part about this graph is what happened between 15 and 16. You can see we had a doubling rate pretty much within 1 year. So from 14 to 15, it was about 60% rate of change. And then 15, 16, something was ripe in the environment for this population to take off. And they basically doubled the problem on our hands within a 12-month period. And that's important for management options. So what have we done? Well, we started out doing trial and error, right? In 15, 16, and 17, we had trial culls and control efforts on various scales. In 15, we started with 3 high-density sites. You can see on the left corner and the left bottom there, that's one of those sites. We used 2 golf courses and 1 residential area, and with 1 color each. And they were using firearms, air rifles, and had permission and knew the area well. And so the risks of control were really limited and managed well. And we got a lot of biological data. So every single animal they brought in, We got biological data from it, and they were paid before and after the cull, before as a standard fee, and then after, if they had removed 90% or more of the iguanas, they got paid a bonus. So there was the incentive there. And I think that was very time consuming for us because we were only 2 people on staff at the time, and we had to go and monitor before and after each of the efforts, which is of course time consuming. Then we expanded the cull in 16 on a larger scale. You can see the entire western part of Grand Cayman were controlled with 19 cullers. So now, as you increase your level of attendance and program, you obviously increase your risks as well because you're not in control of what everyone's doing out there, and if there's firearms involved, it's a whole it's a whole other kettle of fish of risks. And then in 2017, we tried an island-wide cull for the first time at $3 per iguana. I should say the 16 cull was $5 per iguana. And in all, we removed about 50,000 with all these 3 efforts. It was temporary culls as well, I should say. So some of the lessons learned from our trials, well, there were many. Firstly, if you control a small area, and I think this is important, you will actually, and it's a high density area like a golf course or something like that, that is really high class territory for them. So if you remove the territorial males and some of the more established females, you'll actually have animals coming in from the outside, creating an almost honeypot effect, which for other islands could be a really useful tool in managing the population because they don't go into traps readily. You're not easily able to attract them otherwise. So if you have a confined area where you can control the animals, that might create, as I said, a honeypot effect. Very important. But of course, we had a lot of issues. We had partial control over the hunters. Obviously, humane culling is a must. We can't endorse any kind of animal suffering. It's not their fault. We're here to be stewardships of the environment and animal life. So how the media took it up, controlling the narrative, having a processing location where the stench, if you've ever experienced a dead iguana just half an hour after it passed, you'll know what I'm talking about. The daily disposal, hygiene, health and safety. Whenever you pay people to get involved in conservation or especially control of animals, you are inviting disorderly, aggressive behavior, unaffiliated persons that want to be paid. Then, of course, you have the issue of permission to enter, people overholding or adhering to the firearms regulations. If you have mangrove areas where you want animals removed, but people are being paid per animal and they shoot into the mangroves, the animal dies, but you can't retrieve it, you can't get your money. So you have a crippling loss. With all of this said, we were starting to get our eyes up for how difficult this was going to be. Only to find out that we were indeed ready to launch a $9 million iguana cull. And I remember when this came out and we were looking at it and knowing that primarily we would be responsible for hiring, or having a bid, a contractor, to come and actually manage the collars and manage the disposal site and all of these things, because it was just too big of a job for, at this time, 3 people on our terrestrial resources team. So this is what we did. We started an island-wide bounty in 2018 in October, and everyone was registered with a color card, obviously had to go through training of identifying the invasive versus the endemic species, humane culling, etc. So what does that look like? You might be interested to know. We certainly were interested. We were very excited on day 1 because it looked really great. We had a little processing station. We had a little toilet in the back there, a little office. Everything was clean and beautiful. And then the iguanas started coming in. And people had known about this in the beginning. So they had actually saved up iguanas in the freezers. The landscapers and gardeners, I guess, stopped gardening for a bit and started pulling down iguanas from palm trees. These are frozen bags that someone had kept in anticipation of the program starting. it was wild. And the animals that we got in were really big. And the colors started having, internal competitions about who could find the biggest iguana in Grand Cayman. Disposal, this is a carcass pit. Unfortunately, burning all of this biomass is extremely costly in fuel alone. So we now use the carcass pit used primarily for agriculture, dead cows, dead dogs, etc. This is, I think, a couple of hours into the first day of the cull, and everyone got involved. So here you see a Caymanian culler or hunter in his natural environment. And he is extremely excited because he got number 500,000 iguana, and there was a little prize for that. I was excited too, because having come up with the population numbers for so long and having been out there and surveying these animals for at least 4 or 5 years prior to this event, there was questions about whether or not what we were coming up with was really what was out there. And I think it's a really rare opportunity for an ecologist to monitor a population, come up with population numbers, and then having an entire nation go out and collect those animals for you. So you can count them, with a little clicker at a disposal station. So it was a really interesting, experiment, as horrifying as the whole situation is. So where are we now? From 2018 to December 2024, we're still ongoing. These are just annual results. This is what has been removed, okay? So not what's out there, but what we have removed. And because we only started in October 2018, you can see we have about 300,000 removed for the remainder of that year. And then in 2019, we removed over 800,000 iguanas. Then what you can see now, of course, what is the cost associated with that? So far, up until the 1st of 2025, we removed over 1,600,000 iguanas at a cost of 10 million Cayman dollars, which translates to over 12 million US dollars. So that right there, should really be a warning to island nations in particular, but anyone who has invasive reptiles, because we've been very fortunate that we've been able to spend this amount of money, but unfortunate in that we had to spend it. So I hope that anyone listening with a beginning problem will not have to get to these levels, and we can spend it on nature protection instead. That would be wonderful. Now, what worries me and what worries us here at the Department of Environment now is that you can see in the last couple of years, we've had a very, very similar number of iguanas come in. And I just checked, we're pretty much halfway to the 80,000 now in 2025, although we're a little bit behind, which is a good sign. And sustainable harvest is a tongue-in-cheek comment that I put in there, but really that is, the last thing that we want. We want to push the curve to the left and cause an extinction, a man-made extinction in our islands, of course. But these numbers are worrying from a management perspective, because we obviously don't want to continue having to pay for this control. So this is a new addition, some of the population changes that we have observed. This is the age class distribution that we're seeing. This is not removal, this is what is out there. So when we do our surveys, we look at hatchling and juveniles and adults. Here we've combined the juvies, or the subadults, and the adults. And what I think is a really important thing to notice here is the pyramid, right? You'd obviously expect what you're seeing in 2018, a very large bottom part of hatchlings. That's how they reproduce. They flood the environment with hatchlings. And of course, we don't have any natural predation of that. And so this is what you'd expect. Now, in 2020, we were doing very, very well, having removed everything, or a lot of the breeding, reproductive effort of the animals in 2018. But as you can see, it is slowly coming back, and is worryingly close to our 2014 population number. So we're almost back to where we started, one might say, except you see we have a bigger proportion of hatchlings. Now, what that would do for continuous management, does that mean we have a couple of years where we don't have the breeding or the reproductive output, which gives us a chance to get rid of potential future resilience of the population? This is what we're trying to find out at this point. So what may an altered age class distribution have? Population viability assessments, survival rates, reproductive rates, resource availability, and of course, incentivizing the colors as it gets harder and harder to go out there and make the same amount of money is a huge issue that we will be facing and that we need to plan for. Really, we are making it up as we go because this has not been done before. This is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, control effort of reptiles in the world. So another thing that we're finding, which is really interesting, and I'll pull up a bigger figure so you can see it more clearly, is the spatial density distribution. You can see in 16 and 18, we had a lot in the West End. What is in the West End of the island? We have development. We have gardens, pools, golf courses. These animals love, an urbanized environment. And that's why they exploded too, I believe, since after the hurricane in 2004, because any kind of disturbance is perfect for them. They really do not care for primary habitats and dense forests. However, our hunting pressures now have increased to actually push them further east, which is also where we have our blue iguana population, which of course increases the risks there. Another quick note on behavior and habitat use. When we look at some of our parameter estimates, especially with man-modified habitats, which has previously had an association, a strong association, it's less so now. But when we look at wetland habitats in particular, you can see here two very clear pictures of very different behavior. Before the control effort or the removal effort, we had green iguanas sitting out in the open on palm trees, on lawns. And now when we find them on the right, I have issues even getting new surveyors to find the iguanas, especially because they actually move once spotted. They have this shy and avoiding behavior in a new set of vegetation habitats. So this also, of course, impedes or hinders the current control. What works for us now is not going to work for us necessarily in the future. And then lastly, I think I'm doing okay on time, Lucy, but do stop me if not. But lastly, of course, as Joe mentioned, biosecurity and modeling our numbers now, understanding that we need the public, we need a community stewardship, as it were, to really get a handle on this situation and hopefully spend less money, in the future to get this problem under control. So what we're doing with all of our numbers is we're creating Bayesian state space models with posterior distributions of the population given various harvest rates. So of course here you can see the blue dots are the actual population numbers, whereas the red are projected given 3 different harvest scenarios. So we can see, well, what is the pressure that we need to put on the population? Because we have a lot of data, right? But the problem is, how do we get to take that amount of animals out? What is the incentivization needed and the methods used? As I say, what we're doing now is not necessarily what will work in the future. Apologies for the gardening noises in the back. So what we're also using now is the harvest theory to look at. This is a very simple, and if you're into fisheries, often used fisheries harvest model. Obviously, when you look at an abundance, we want to take out more than is being reproduced, right? So we want to shift that curve to the left and do unsustainable removal. That's kind of, where we're at. And of course, another thing that we need to think about is we need to take into account the release of intraspecific competition, or the Hydra effect. As you may know, the Greek mythology of the animal with all the heads. The more you remove, the more the population can grow, especially if you have an increasing carrying capacity, as I believe we do with all of the development continually happening on island. So this is an extremely flexible and complex situation that requires adaptive management for sure. Biosecurity, just touching on that very briefly, these are the 3 islands that we have. And this is, as Joe mentioned, we just saw what happened in Jamaica a couple of days ago. 5 animals were captured by Joey Brown, our colleague, in the port of Jamaica. And we have discovered this ourselves. As you see on the left bottom there, iguanas coming straight from Grand Cayman. With a density like that, it's hard to avoid, right? Onto the sister islands. So containers, we've been educating port staff. We've had community searches continue to have really good. We're very blessed with a beautiful community on both islands, understanding they do not want to get to the point Grand Cayman got at. And we have a lot of early detection, wildlife hotline. We've been in the schools, we've done the talks. We do rapid response through WhatsApp groups. Everyone chiming in with the identification of the species, the location, and then somebody to respond straight away. And when we get animals, there's a jubilation. It's very exciting that people are getting involved and helping this effort. Obviously, public education, humane euthanasia, all of that good stuff is included in that. So I think I was just about on time. So if there's any questions, do let me know. And I hope you're still all out there because it's been very quiet on my side. I will stop sharing now.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
I think we've got a couple of minutes left. So I've noticed a couple of questions come into the chat, so we can just do those quickly. One asking how economically viable is euthanasia?
Say it again.
How economically viable is euthanasia?
How economically viable is
I mean, I
euthanasia?
think it's the only way. It depends on your control program. If a color is being paid, for his or her efforts, then it's not like there is an alternative. If I think this question may lead on to, can we use the meat for something? And it has been, really heavily discussed, and so none of us want to waste these animals and the biomass they represent. But the green iguanas are protected under CITES. So we are dealing with a protected species, in case you didn't know, and they're under CITES Appendix 2, which means any export of any part of a green iguana needs a permit, which makes it really extremely non-viable to do that.
Yeah, it's complicated. Another one asking, have you got any suspicions that anyone is farming the green iguanas to earn the bounty?
So we have actually managed to establish a really great rapport in and between the colors on island. So if there was any kind of untoward behavior, they're pretty self-policing. They know that because this is a livelihood now for people, and anything to jeopardize that is obviously not well looked at. But we have also incentivized the culling of breeding adults by increasing that price tag. So bigger adults are worth more money, and therefore it's not worth the hassle of waiting for them to lay, which is also not that easily done.
Okay, one last question.
To follow that up, in Florida, it can't be proven, but it's a pretty well-known thing that people are seeding their own avocado grows with different chameleons so they can hunt them later. And
Wow.
We've been hearing about that, and that again, we can't prove it, but it's probably happening.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, and then if anyone does have any burning questions, you can send them to us. I'll put our email address in the chat and we can try and get those answered. But yeah, just to end on, can you reduce population numbers by destroying eggs or nests?
Jane?
People have done that, especially I believe in Puerto Rico. I see we have a Puerto Rican colleague and friend of mine in the audience. So some islands have issues with the killing of animals legally, and therefore it has been kind of a last resort for some island nations to inundate, for example, nests with salt water. It is not an efficient way of doing things, especially because when you have native iguanas too, you have to really know your stuff of which nests you're destroying. Are you destroying a rock iguana nest, or are you destroying a green iguana nest? I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, to follow that up, to locate the actual nest cavity is very
It can be hard.
time-consuming.
Yeah, true.
Because a green iguana will dig down and then it'll go left, right, somewhere. It'll go up 2 meters or more. So locating the actual cavity is very time-consuming.
Okay.
Lucy,
Yes.
just before we go, there's one question from Ron. I'm just going to answer because it's quite important. The Cayman's government, correct me if I'm wrong, Jane, have funded this program, and it's obviously extremely expensive, and as you said, taking money away from elsewhere. But that is correct. This has been funded by the Caymans themselves.
That is correct. More specifically, it's been funded by the EPF, our Environmental Protection Fund, which is topped up by travelers coming in and out of the country, which is a system I believe we stole from the TCI back in the day. But yeah, and obviously all of us would prefer to see that money being spent on protection of our remaining habitat instead of this. But it is what it is.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, I've put our email address in the chat, so if anyone does have questions, you can contact us and we'll try and get those answered. But yeah, thank you so much to our speakers today. They were brilliant talks. It's really great to hear about this work. And thank you very much for getting up early to join us as well.
Thanks so much for having us. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
and thank you everyone for joining.
Okay. Bye.